The world's a pretty big place. With our busy lives, no reasonable person can be expected to keep up with the biggest headlines each week, so I'm here to do it for you. This is Tony Pearson coming to you on behalf of WHIP with this week's Big Picture. Despite everything I said last week about expecting things to really heat up with North Korea and Syria, oddly enough, not that much happened this past week regarding those two. Things also certainly haven't de-escalated, and there are some updates which I'm going to provide, particularly with North Korea, but nothing crazy happened, which genuinely surprised me because the past few weeks, for those of you who've been keeping up, have been a little bit nuts. I'm going to keep this one a bit shorter because, as you all know, it is time for finals, and conveniently, because this is just the kind of thing that seems to happen, I am sick as hell. I am very quickly finding that working sick is one of the less fun parts of being an adult. But I digress. Beginning with North Korea, the country made headlines this past Friday when it detained Korean-American Tony Kim, aged 50, which makes the third such detainment to happen in the past 5 or so years. Tony Kim was detained on Friday as he attempted to leave the isolated country after he had spent a month teaching at the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, abbreviated PUST, or P-U-S-T. According to the university's chancellor, Chan Mo Park, in an interview with Reuters on Sunday, the cause of his arrest is not known, but some officials at PUST told me his arrest was not related to his work at PUST. He had been involved with some other activities outside PUST, such as helping an orphanage. Park went on to say that he sincerely hopes and prays that he will be released soon. The university at which Park worked was founded by evangelical Christians, opening in 2010. Most of the students who attend are generally children of the country's elite. This is because most people in North Korea can't afford going to college. In fact, right now, North Korea's been suffering from starvation and lack of resources for a very long time. A lot of the people don't have money for food, let alone higher education. Even so, universities like this one are important because they are getting education to people that are famously quite downtrodden, with curriculums including subjects such as capitalism, which is quite difficult to learn about in North Korea. But on the topic of Tony Kim's detainment, North Korean officials haven't said anything yet, likely because they are not yet done with their investigations. Tony Kim is not the only American being held by North Korea, as mentioned earlier. Otto Warmbier, a 22-year-old student, made news last year when he was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor after attempting to steal a propaganda poster or banner. Another famous case in March 2016, Korean-American Kim Dong-chul, aged 62, was sentenced to 10 years of hard labor for subversion. I feel this goes without saying, but traveling to North Korea right now is not a very good idea. These individuals have been detained, in most cases, on very shaky evidence and given sentences that are not at all warranted for what it is claimed they've done. Most of the expert analysis I have read online seems to agree that North Korea is detaining Americans when they can find a reason to, because it gives them chips to bargain with on the rare occasion that they talk with American officials, because there are no official diplomatic relations between the U.S. and North Korea, for obvious reasons. So once again, if there's something to take away from this, now is not a good time to travel to North Korea. In medical news, a fairly scary development on a popular drug for epilepsy. Valproate, a popular epilepsy medication, has been found to cause serious malformations in children when prescribed to pregnant women. In case that wording isn't entirely clear, it's found to make birth defects more prevalent, with a French study specifically mentioning that it has made women up to 4 times likelier to give birth to a malformed child. The drug was introduced in France in 1967 and is now used globally, primarily because it works. It helps with epilepsy, and to a lesser extent, it's used to treat bipolar disorder. But this new evidence suggests that it is much more dangerous than we had previously thought in regard to pregnant women and their children, and it seems that up to 4,100 children may have been affected, once again according to a French study, which can be found outlined on the BBC and a number of other news outlets, especially over in Europe. This is a big story. In a statement from the manufacturer, Sanofi, to BBC, they've stated that they are totally transparent with health authorities and that, I'm quoting here, "We are aware of the painful situation confronting the families of children showing difficulties that may have a link with the anti-epileptic treatment of their mother during pregnancy. One of the birth defects connected to the drug is called spina bifida. This occurs when a section of the spinal column forms improperly and can also cause defects to the heart and genital organs. Additionally, risks of autism and other development problems have also been found to be higher. Because of the severity of these findings, a follow-up report will be due later this year." Now, while the medication is certainly effective at what it does, and this, of course, appears to be an accident, a lot of people are angry because it seems that it actually took a long time for these dangers to become apparent, despite there being some inkling of a problem since the early 1980s, when the first fears that the drug might be a factor in birth defects arose. However, it was not until 2014 that a lot of rules surrounding these prescription drugs got a bit stricter, and so it is only recently that a solid connection has been found. In the meantime, if you or someone you know is pregnant and is taking medication for epilepsy, it might be worth talking to a doctor to make sure they're not taking this medication. The name given in most sources that I've researched is Valproate, but I know that the drug goes by a number of names around the globe. So like I said, if you or someone you know falls into these categories, they should probably talk to their doctor. Moving over to the UK, there's been a bit of an unexpected development around Brexit. For those of you who are not in the loop, Britain recently decided to secede from the European Union. And for those of you who are really outside of the loop, the European Union it's not technically a country, but it's a larger government that a great number of European countries have voluntarily combined themselves into in order to compete economically with other large economies such as the US, and to provide better economic opportunities and more consistent laws and travel and immigration policies between all of the European nations. Additionally, the EU has started to avoid war because for a long time, Europe has been plagued by a lot of wars. Now, I'm not sure how much I talked about it on here, but when the UK or Britain first decided to secede, I thought it was a terrible idea. There are a lot of benefits to being in the EU, with the only major downside being that a bit of sovereignty is lost. Although in the case of Britain, they maintained a very special status where they got to keep a lot of their sovereignty that other nations don't. One of the big reasons they wanted to leave was that they wanted to be able to negotiate more of their own trade deals and the like. They were warned that as an individual nation, their economy can't really compete with the US, the EU, China, stuff like that. But they went ahead and seceded anyway for that and a bunch of other reasons. The recent news that I'm sharing with you guys now comes to the surprise of no one, I think, really, except for the people who supported the Brexit movement. Trump has put the EU ahead of Britain in a queue for working out trade deals. More specifically, Britain has been pushed behind the European Union to strike a more free trade deal with the United States. This is according to officials in Washington, as reported in the Times. Originally, and this is why a lot of Trump supporters supported Brexit and why a lot of Brexit supporters supported Trump, Trump had opposed negotiating with the EU and actually supported Brexit. But he softened this opposition and started working with them after his attempts to negotiate with individual countries weren't successful. And once again, I'm not quite sure why so many people are surprised by this. That's how it works. The EU is a big multinational government, and you can't just go in and try to associate with the smaller states and expect the system to just fall apart or the states to just rebel and leave. They have a lot of reason to stay and cooperate with the EU. It would be like if the EU were trying to make a bunch of free trade deals with, Colorado, and Colorado said, no, can't do it because I'm a part of the United States. You got to talk with the federal government first. After Trump's attempts were met with failure, the president spoke with Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, and an important figure in the EU, and was apparently convinced that talks on a EU-US deal would be simpler than he thought, once again according to a report from the Times, and it seems that that is what led to the EU being put ahead of Britain in the trade queue. Once again, not sure why people are surprised by this. The whole point of the EU was to create an economy that was on a scale that it could compete and or work with the US. Britain is no longer an empire. It hasn't been since the end of World War II. The island itself does not have much to offer in the form of trade and natural resources. So when it comes to economic trade deals like these, it doesn't have a lot of swaying power compared to the EU. I usually try not to get too opinionated on here, but they really did shoot themselves in the foot with this one. Being said, not to bash on the UK all day, Britain did make a very important step as far as renewable or environmentally friendly power generation goes when, on Friday, Britain went a full day without using coal to generate electricity, and this is the crazy part, for the first time since the Industrial Revolution began, at least since the beginning period of the Industrial Revolution. Before now, Britain's longest energy period without using coal was about 19 hours. This occurred first in May of last year, and then more recently again on Thursday. But I think we can all agree that going a full day is a pretty big achievement. This offers a glimmer of hope for the future of energy in the UK and the world at large, I think. It is a nice step in the positive direction of Britain's plans to phase out some of the last coal power plants by 2025, coal being a very dirty source of electricity. So that's a little bit of good news to end on. Not as many stories as I usually have, and certainly much lighter on the topics of North Korea and Syria than I thought. It really wasn't that crazy of a week compared to where we were a week ago, where, I don't know, I was expecting more missiles to be launched or something. I'm glad they weren't, though. Technically speaking, this is supposed to be the last episode of The Big Picture, but I'm going to try to get another one out sometime next week. So, tune in then if you want more. Coming to you all on behalf of WHIP, I'm Tony Pearson. Have a nice week.